There are two brand new tanks in this latest update news coming into World of Tanks console, and hopefully you guys will be interested because we not only have the two tanks coming in, but one of them's already released on some of the other versions of World of Tanks that we actually have, including PC and Blitz, and so we can have a look at them. As well as we've got some information regarding some new event game modes that are actually coming in next week, and some extra little bits in there as well. So without further ado, of course, the first tank that we're looking at and finally getting is the Object 259A, which is the Object 259A, and as with all objects, essentially they're mostly Soviet vehicles, and so the Object 259A is a Soviet heavy tank at tier 8, so it's a tier 8 premium vehicle that is finally released into console. And we'll get into the armor of this tank because it's definitely got a bit of a weird armor layout, considering a lot of the Soviet vehicles and how they typically have their armor. But getting straight into the statistics of the tank and what it's actually got, well, it has a 122mm and high alpha damage that it brings is apparently what Wargaming are calling this one. So with that being said, the alpha damage is 420. It has 233mm of standard pen with 285 as its premium, which is actually very strong considering that this tank gets APCR as standard and heat ammunition as its secondary round. However, the heat ammunition is very painfully slow, and so will really only be used when you're in those close quarter engagements against other heavy tanks. Well, typically, obviously you can use them at longer ranges, it's just going to take a hell of a lot more of a lead time, and 820 meters a second makes this thing almost as slow at firing rounds as it is when you use the HE rounds with 790 shell velocity. And not only that, the penetration of the HE is 61, so it allows for a lot of light tanks at tier 8 and below, and of course higher tier light tanks, but also medium tanks as well, especially if you get the rear of vehicles. 61 is actually not bad, and this one will deal 530 damage, so it will be really useful for those Waffle Panzer IVs, Borsigs, that sort of tanks that you see in the game. FE 4005s, for example, if you manage to get unlucky and see one of those in the game, looking at you, you can at least deal 530 back to it with those HE, but if you don't, the 420 is actually really nice, as well as the fact that you have pretty decent accuracy, 0.4 for the amount of alpha. However, yet again with these sorts of tanks, they're usually let down by the damage per minute, and this one has 1789 base damage per minute, which will definitely get better because you can probably sit at around 2200 when you've kind of fully kitted this tank out, maybe slightly higher than that, but at the same time it is on the lower end. And so your reload for this vehicle is quite long, and so yeah, a 4.26 rounds a minute puts this tank at about a 15-second reload, just slightly under, about 14.5 seconds or something like that to fully reload this vehicle. So you got a long time to wait to deal that 420 alpha. However, when you do boost that up, it's going to get better and that sort of thing. You're probably looking at around about the 10-second mark with everything kind of fully kitted out in this tank, but it's still not amazing. So you'll get found out quite easily when someone with good DPM rocks up on top of you. And for that, you have a power to weight ratio of 15, which is okay. Certainly not the highest we've ever seen, but for a heavy tank it's okay, and a top speed limit of 60 kilometers an hour. So they're trying to go with the kind of rhetoric that this is a IS-7 at tier 8. However, when you see the armor model, you'll definitely understand why this tank isn't the IS-7 at tier 8. And it does have some weird nuances, and that this tank is slightly different to kind of how you would typically expect a tank like this to play. But at the end of the day, it is quite an interesting one with regards to its armor. 60 kilometers an hour is probably not going to be reached quite easily, so you're going to have to use some of the speed boost equipment that boosts horsepower if you want to consistently go this speed, and certainly it would most likely be looking at about 45 kilometers an hour for most areas of the map, but at the end of the day, the 60 kilometers an hour is really nice if you can reach it and you're going long distances, so traveling from one side of the map to the other. It's definitely going to help you out over some of the other heavy tanks, and when you look at things like the KV4 and stuff like that, you'll definitely be way faster, and so you do get that benefit and should make the tank a little bit more useful. You get 6 degrees of depression, which is good, and you've also got 16 degrees of elevation, which is bad. Well, not bad, but it isn't particularly great. And so, yeah, you should be fine when it comes to slight ridge lines, but you can't use it on a ridge line as well. And so, yeah, overall, statistics-wise, this tank looks like a overall average vehicle, or slightly better than average, depending on how the speed will actually impact the performance of the tank. And so, yeah, overall, as well as the kind of all of the statistics, the armor model is where we're really wanting to find out. And so let's have a look at the armor, and of course this is worldoftanks.gg. This is the armor model taken from PC. We don't have a armor viewer for console, unfortunately, but this one is essentially what this tank is. You can see that visually this is what the tank looks like. It is the same tank. You can see that you've got this kind of lower plate areas on the left and on the right, as well as a weird little area here. Another funny thing about this is that those areas to the left and right, they're not actually able to be penned. These are not armor. These are just essentially spaced armor that kind of act to pull in the tracks to the main center of the tank. This one has a kind of, I guess, boat-shaped hull, or at least a kind of triangular hull armor at the bottom, which means that you don't really have the full armor coming all the way out to the tracks. And so when it comes to the essentially the armor, you've got this weird triangle diamond shaped area in the center if you're looking directly at it, which can be penned really easily. And the good thing about it is that, of course, some people are going to be able to kind of miss your shells and hit this plate, and so there's a lot of auto ricochet angles which are going to cause bounces. However, if anyone is actually fully aiming, which in console probably is actually not that many people, so you should be able to bounce a fair few rounds from that auto aim if you're kind of wiggling as they fire and stuff like that. But for the most part, if someone's actually aiming and you are at any kind of area of an angle, this thing is going to kind of be penned. So you can see here, as soon as you start to move out like this, all of your armor here basically becomes pennable, and it's really bad. Like, you were going to get penned so easily. This is using the heat ammunition. When you're using APCR with slightly lower pen, then yeah, you can see here you're going to find yourself in a world of pain, not pen, and so you're going to get penned by most things in the game. You'll also find that when you're using your tank like this, and if someone is above you, you are going to get penned all of the time, which is not great. However, of course, if you're using the turret armor of this vehicle, it's actually pretty solid. There are a few weak points that I can showcase when people have super high pen that you've got to be aware of. And of course, you've got the cupola, which everyone can pen regardless of kind of where you're at on the tank. It is pretty weak, 130 millimeters roughly when you're using the tank. So yeah, you're going to get penned quite easily in that cupola, but when people start using those heat rounds, you'll see that the mantlet of this vehicle, or at least the left and right hand side of the mantlet, are the weak points. So you can pen this thing with premium ammunition upwards of about 270 to, well, like 265 to like 280 is going to be kind of that intermediate range where maybe you'll bounce, and anything higher than that, which is a lot of tier 8 medium, tier 10 mediums and stuff like that, they're going to go through your turret. So you just have to be aware of that if you are kind of coming up against this thing. Obviously quite a slim shot to hit here, but it can be done, and people would definitely aim for it if they're decent players and they've kind of learnt the weak points of this vehicle. So just be aware of that if you're going to think about purchasing the tank. Obviously that diamond, super easy to pen, and as soon as you kind of angle yet again that lower plate, the bit like kind of leading onto the diamond, that is going to be pennable, as well as the upper plate as well. And then you might have thought, well, maybe you can side scrape with this vehicle. Well, you can, but the problem is that you are going to have to stop way before this front plate. As soon as you expose the front plate, it's all over. And the problem is that in order to side scrape effectively, you are going to have to release some of your armor, which is pennable. So you have to bait their shot into this area, which they can actually pen, because there's this weird area at the back of the vehicle which can be penned. This is an actual pennable area, as well as the kind of lower half of the vehicle is also pennable in between the tracks. So yeah, you can see it has some really weird armor, and I think that a lot of people are going to go for your cupola. People are going to go for that lower plate. People go for the upper plate when you kind of angle a little bit. And it really, I don't think the armor is going to work all too well. It isn't thick enough to actually make it work. However, of course, this is the PC version of the tank. Maybe console are going to buff all of these areas slightly. But for the most part, I don't think the armor of this tank is going to work all too well. This tank definitely looks like a Object 260 sort of vehicle. If for those of you that don't know, that is the tier 10 Object 260. It is in the game, and that's kind of probably how it's going to play. It looks to be quite an interesting looking vehicle, which is good. And overall, I think that it's a good addition. Is it going to be super overpowered? I don't think so. The armor just isn't going to be there to make it an overpowered tier 8. So with that being said, that is the Object 259A, a very, very good vehicle. Probably not overpowered, and certainly its armor isn't going to hold up in those higher tier games that you're going to be playing in. So yeah. Either way, we don't just have World War II tanks, we also have the introduction of a brand new Cold War tank as well. This is the medium, this is the K tank, so this is the Chrysler K vehicle. And you can see here, this is what it looks like. And so, yeah, the Chrysler K tank Escalation Era 2, Western Alliance, better known as the K tank, brings you a classic American-inspired tank with added firepower. Make it loud and clear that your enemies are not welcome on the battlefield. So what does this tank have? Well, it is a tank that's capable of having a 60% silver bonus, alongside 10% commander XP bonus, 15% tank XP bonus. You have a power to weight ratio of 15, so it's not particularly very fast, with a top speed of 52 kilometers an hour, which again in era kind of 2 is not super slow, but it is not that fast. So you're gonna struggle with keeping up with some of the mediums and heavies that have higher power to weight and speed limits. The hull traverse decent, and turret traverse is decent. Gun depression of 10 degrees is really nice, alongside having penetration of 350 and 780 alpha damage. This is looking like it's going to be a bit of a clubber when it comes to the gun. 380 pen on the premium rounds, which are heat rounds, so you know you're probably not going to be wanting to use those all too much in Cold War. And then the HE rounds, or the final rounds even, are the ATGM, which deal 1,100 damage. And so it's kind of like one of those vehicles that, I guess, like the Starship, that is going to be able to fire all kinds of different rounds. So you've got your standard APCR essentially, and then a heat round, and then an ATGM, and all of these are essentially dealing 780 or more damage, especially with those ATGMs and 1,100. So yeah, it looks like this tank is going to be a lot of fun. I think the reload 13.9 seconds for a DPM of 3.3k is actually not bad. and you can kind of see what this tank is all about right here. It does definitely look interesting. The armor is probably not going to work all too well on this tank. It doesn't seem to have very many space plates or anything like that, so you're going to have to play almost like what you would see with I guess a tank destroyer, considering the alpha damage and that sort of thing. And really you're going to be a big support tank that can just deal the damage to your opponents, which is good. And so yeah, armor wise doesn't look all too great, so you're going to get penned most of the time by everyone else. But most importantly, how do you actually get it? Well, of course, with all of these tanks being premium tanks, and we'll go back to the Chrysler or the Object 259A as well after this, you are going to have to purchase both of these. This one is the Chrysler K tank, which has 16,500 gold for the top version, 14.6k for the middle version, and 12.9k gold for the kind of bottom version. And that is essentially £35, which is probably like $45, something like that, to be able to purchase this tank, which is very expensive for one tank on this game, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it, although it looks like it could be quite a fun vehicle. And we'll do a full tank review of this when it comes into the game, which is coming in next Tuesday, I would assume, 27th of February, which is indeed Tuesday, as well as the 259A, which is also a pretty decent vehicle coming in on Tuesday. However, this one is considerably cheaper, with the top version being 13,400, the middle version being 11,300, and then the 259A base version being 8,800, so a little bit more manageable if you want to get a vehicle. But those are the two new tanks coming into the game. It looks like they should be quite good ones, and definitely ones that are worth at least maybe seeing and finding out about. And then maybe you'd want to get them, but for the most part, this new K tank, very expensive, but yeah, maybe it is really worth it for you to spend the money on it, and of course we'll do a full tank review of both of them. But that's not it for this week. This week we have, of course, the update news information regarding what is actually available. Well, here's the next week's news. There is, of course, the best operation coming back into the game, or one of the best ones, that will give you a ton of XP. So anyone grinding any of the tech tree lines is gonna love it. That is because String Theory is back. This is the game mode whereby if you kind of string wins in together, you're going to get more XP per game at the end of each of those wins. It starts off with your standard XP when you win your first game. If you can win 2 games in a row, you're going to be able to get double XP. If you win 3 games in a row, you'll get 3 times the XP of your game. If you get 4 wins in a row, you get 4 times, and then 5 wins in a row is where you get 5 times, and then anything after 5 wins in a row, so if you get 20 wins, your 20th win will still get 5 times XP. It just keeps on going, essentially, with 5 times XP once you reach the 5 win mark. If you can string together 5 million games in a row with you winning all of them, then yeah, you would still only be getting 5 times XP for all of those games past the 5 times XP kind of marker. And so, yeah, you can earn a ton of XP. Of course, the better the player you are, or at least the more team player you are that actually gets wins, the better your XP is going to be. This is not a real individual kind of thing, and it's more of a case of, you know, you just hope that you win quite a few in a row, and it's going to boost you up significantly with your XP requirements. Is it as good as XP with interest? Absolutely not. XP with interest is the best mode where you can earn so much XP, but of course with XP with interest, in order to maximize the XP and get the real bonuses that it has, you need to have your XP boosters which act towards the operation. This is just basically, if you can get as much wins in a row, then you're going to get way more XP. So I think this mode is kind of, I guess, it doesn't require you to spend money on the game to purchase XP boosters or whatever, but at the same time, you aren't getting the XP results every single game. So yeah, either way, it's a good operation and a good time to actually grind through getting your XP. So yeah, it is really, really nice. Of course, then control mode is back from the 27th of February to the 4th of March, and that's for Era 2 Cold War. With True Vision enabled, it's a 7 versus 7, and Era 2, of course. The match duration is 600 seconds, and then you've got the following maps. It's Azure Coast, Serene Coast, Nebelberg and Overlord available, and for every 2000 XP you earn in control, you'll also get an extra season point, so that's also like an additional extra for that mode. Of course, we have the Lucky Sevens mode that we had in the game, and I assume Wargaming on console are just going to kind of keep on going with just doing these sorts of events where we'll get them every now and again, not all of the time, but every now and again, and go through and play them. So yeah, the control mode, which is like a team deathmatch type thing, with essentially respawns on the game, and so you have to just get to the points requirement to be able to complete it. So that's nice. Contracts wise, we're getting the Tusk and the Lawgiver getting it back into the game. If you were curious for the community quiz answers, which we covered last week, and of course did the quizzes, you had the following answers. These were essentially the first one being put your name in for the actual game with the X or P. So obviously if you didn't do that one right, you didn't get entered. Our original nations were USA, Germany and UK. So this was the question referring to what were the original nations on World of Tanks console. It was USA, Germany and UK. The original name of the game was World of Tanks 3 Xbox 360 edition, which is absolutely true. And they've gone through a lot of names in the past 10 years, but we're now known as World of Tanks Modern Armor. They had World of Tanks, World of Tanks Console, and then they had World of Tanks Mercenaries and stuff like that. There was loads of different names that kind of went through when they had different themes of the game as they introduced new stuff. So yeah, there was loads of different names. So the original was indeed World of Tanks Xbox 360 edition, which then got changed as Xbox One edition came out, and then we had the World of Tanks PS4 when they joined a couple years after the original World of Tanks got released on consoles. So there was no PS4 originally in the game. It was just on Xbox exclusively. Of course, then the first nation to get a tech tree after the original trio was the USSR. So the Soviet tanks were not actually in the game to begin with. Each year for your in-game anniversary, you would receive 7 days of premium and the yearly emblems as well. So that was the answer to what do you get as your anniversary each year. The Equalizer is our only artillery that has a barrage fire mode option. You can find this as a package in the tank's loadout. Essentially, it's just like, I think it's something like three auto-loading shells with like a couple of barrages each one. They're really low alpha damage, and it's just really a pain in the backside for any light tanks, because not only will they pen you, but they'll also track you in place, which is just super annoying. And this barrage mode just shouldn't have really been made, in my opinion. It was definitely not needed, even though it might be it's not even true to life, because of course you need multiple artillery pieces per barrage anyway, which is how a barrage is formed. But you know, I guess they tried to make it more realistic in how the shells would actually land. Dead City was our very first Halloween map. Dead City, of course, I believe that was Himmelsdorf, but I'm not entirely sure. But either way, it was the first Halloween map. I definitely played it, and that was back when we had the Spectre as the only kind of Halloween tank. And I remember I did a news article when they first brought in the Halloween game mode, which featured the Kaiju OI and a various different other kind of Halloween tanks for the first time. We have 4 flamethrower tanks. There's the Churchill Oak or Oki, whatever you want to call it, the TVP VTU, and the Soldier on M67 and the Senjutsu. So those are all the vehicles currently with flamethrowers. Our What's Happening article releases on a Tuesday, and finally the Tiger One is our most played tank with over 58 million battles played, and that's no surprise considering that, of course, this one is the iconic, I guess, the Tiger tank. Almost everyone knows about it and probably goes towards it at the beginning of their World of Tanks career. So yeah, it's definitely a real kind of interesting one to have some of the questions. And some of them I definitely didn't know originally. So I did not know the first nation to get a tech tree after the original trio was the USSR. So I wasn't there for that, or I might have been there for that, but I just don't remember. It was a long time ago of playing the game, and I'm sure some of you definitely don't remember that, but either way, there you go, now you do. PS, we will definitely be doing this again, so keep our eyes peeled. So yeah, that will definitely be something they would be doing again. Of course, the grand prize was a T14 and Celebration War Chest, which went to Shah 72. The runner-up was 3 days of premium and 1 Celebration War Chest to iEcho. And then the participation was 1 Celebration War Chest for the Foul. So yeah, either way, that is all of the update news for this week. Hopefully you enjoyed. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see some more. But more importantly, I hope you have a fantastic day and of course a fantastic weekend. And I hope that you'll join me back in some of the live streams that we'll be continuing with after I have been ill. So yeah, fantastic right as we begin. But either way, thank you very much and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.